Sir, may I come in?
Coming.
Good afternoon.
Sit down.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, sir.
How do you pronounce your name? Meenal or Minal?
Meenal, sir.
Meenal.
Yes, sir.
Why did you stop pursuing your career in defense force?
Sir, Defense Forces was not a priority as such. But since I was preparing for the civil services, I just wanted to test my knowledge initially. So that is why I gave a few written exams in Defense Forces and I qualified them. I also appeared for the SSBs, but I couldn't clear the SSB.
But you haven't said that you qualified. Whether appeared for the examination. Appeared. You didn't qualify. इसमें नहीं लिखा हो.
Sir, I qualified the written examination, but not the SSB.
Not this. वो तो लिखा हुआ है आपने.
Yes, sir.
Appeared for the interview. उसमें भी लिखा no.
So CDS interview, I did not appear. I appeared for ASCAT and
NDA and combined defense services you
no, sir.
didn't appear.
Yes, sir.
अच्छा. Okay. FCAT mentioned नहीं.
Sir, AFCAT is not a UPSC examination. That is why I was not given the option to write it.
अच्छा. Okay. Okay. You do endurance cycling.
Yes, sir.
What is the difference between endurance cycling and normal cycling?
Sir, endurance cycling is long distance cycling. For example, I do 35 to 40 kilometers once in a week. Normal cycling, on the other hand, can be done every day for 35 to 40 minutes, depending on the person's stamina.
Okay. And you need a special kind of cycle?
No,
That
sir.
endurance cycle? Do it on your normal cycle or you have a special cycle for this?
No, sir. I have a normal non-geared cycle and I do it on neck.
You do it singly or you do it in a group?
Sir, I have a friend with whom I prefer going and we go on every Sunday.
But Dehradun, as soon as you go out 5 kilometers, you'll encounter hills.
So we go towards Haridwar.
Haridwar.
Yes, sir.
Painting, sketching
Yes.
is your, and you said ballpoint sketching. What is the difference between ballpoint sketching and pencil sketching? Why this specific? You can't sketch with pencil?
Sir, I can sketch with pencil, but I started doing ball pen sketching after I started my UPSC journey. It is more convenient. I can always keep a paper at the back of my copy and start sketching whenever I don't feel like studying. So it has mainly started after the UPSC journey. Regarding the difference between pencil sketching and
For sketching, you have to have the object in front, that particular object in front, or you do a random sketching?
sir, I prepare a framework beforehand and then I just keep the paper with me and then I keep sketching in it, I keep shadowing, etc. Yes, sir.
You have given foreign service as your second choice,
Yes, sir.
which is good. Why second choice? Why grade it over IPS?
IPS is a first choice.
IAS is first choice. So you graded it above IPS, no? IPS is your third choice.
Yes, sir. Sir, I've ranked the services according to my limited knowledge. I think foreign service is a very vibrant service, which is a very, I think, a beautiful job profile. I get to travel around the world and I get to take part in the policy making, especially in the foreign policy of the nation. So I think the job profile is what attracted me more than the IPS.
So why didn't you give it as the first choice?
Sir, Indian Administrative Service provides me a larger platform and an opportunity to interact with the public directly. So this long-term impact that I'm able to create from the administrative services, that is what made me prefer it over.
And IPS could have been the
IPS could have been better.
second choice.
Sir,
Try an IFS.
Sir, I don't think one service is better than the other. But according to my caliber and aptitude, I have ranked the services as well as my limited knowledge about the service.
Khelo India volleyball.
Yes, sir.
There's a one person with a different uniform in volleyball. What is it called? What is that person called?
So the person standing at the position of libero wears a different uniform.
What is libero?
Sir, he is the keystone of the defensive strategy of the team. He stands at the middle of the backcourt and defends the attacks, receives most of the attacks from the opposite team, and then passes it to the setter.
You came from Dehradun when? Here. Will you become
So around 4th of December.
for 2 days ago?
Yes.
What difference do you find here in the air?
Sir, I expected even worse because there were a lot of news that were coming related to AQI. But when I reached there at Delhi, I think this is definitely the most polluted air I've ever breathed. But when I reached here, I think it wasn't as worse. But I was told that it has now improved. But compared to Dehradun, I think there is a major difference. Dehradun's average AQI is 70 to 80. In Delhi, on the other hand, it is about 300 to 400. So
What do you think, in your view, are the causes of this kind of pollution in Delhi?
sir, it is an interplay of multiple factors. First of all, the geographical position of Delhi. It is situated in a bowl-like topography. So the pollution from the surrounding areas collects in Delhi, and the polluted air isn't able to escape. Secondly, there are multiple industrial areas around Delhi. Uh, Also, vehicular emission plays a major role. These are some of the factors that play a role in Delhi pollution.
Why? What are the other interests you have? Physics. You have taken physics.
Yes, sir.
Explain the Newton's laws, or whatever they are called.
Yes, sir. Newton has.
There are 3 of them.
Yes, sir. So the first one is law of inertia, which says that an object will stay at rest or in motion until and unless a force is applied. The second one, the formula goes like force is equals to mass into acceleration. So force is directly proportional to acceleration.
Acceleration is denoted by which letter?
So it is denoted by small a. Yes, sir. And the third law says that every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
So what is the difference between the first and the third?
Sir, the first one, according to the first law,
Inertia.
inertia. So every object has an inertia of its own. So until and unless a force is applied, it will not change its state of motion. On the other hand, the third law states that when an object changes its state of motion, it will have an equal and opposite reaction. So the first one states about what happens before the state of motion is changed, and the third one explains what happens after the state of motion is changed.
Okay. What are the causes of so much of uh, disasters in Uttarakhand and Himachal also? And how, if you get into IAS, what will be your advice to the government?
Sir, it is an interplay of multiple factors. First of all, unplanned construction along the river valleys is one of the factors. Major hydropower projects in ecologically sensitive areas. And then there is the geographical location of the place itself. It is located in a seismologically vulnerable area. So these are some of the factors. If I get into the Indian Administrative Service, I think there are a few solutions that I can give.
But there have been no earthquake-related disasters in these parts in the recent times.
Yes, sir.
You said seismological area.
Sir,
It has happened in Kashmir.
Yes, sir.
It hasn't happened of late in Uttarakhand, and it has happened in the northeast.
Sir,
Why do you count this as a factor?
Sir, there are minor tremors regularly. The last time I experienced an earthquake was in 2023. But I think I'm assuming that you're talking about cloud bursts, which are not seismological in
Not
nature.
only that, is ground sliding down and so many other things.
Sir, I think they are mainly anthropogenic in nature. Unplanned construction in the vulnerable sites, I think that is the main reason for such disasters, especially the Joshimath landsliding. That was a result of.
In view of that, is Char Dham road connectivity is a good idea or a bad idea?
Sir, the Char Dham project the intent is strategic. It will increase the tourism industry in Uttarakhand. as well as connect the border roads, which will aid to military logistics. But at the same time, we cannot deny the fact that there are ecological implications of the same. There
That could have been done to prevent this.
So the government could have struck a balance between infrastructural development and ecological sustainability. There was the committee constituted under Professor Ravi Chopra, which recommended that the road can be widened to 5.5 meters against the MORTH guidelines of 10 meters. So that will strike a balance between the two. This could have been.
How wide is the road now nowadays? कितनी चौड़ी बनाई है इन्होंने?
So the construction is going on, but I think they're going with the 10-meter guidelines.
So they are violating those recommendations.
Yes, sir, because they were non-binding in nature. At the same time, the project was fragmented into 53 parts to bypass the mandatory environmental
And then is what is that called? Silt accumulation in the valley, is that also a problem?
Sir, the construction has definitely increased the sediment inflow in the rivers, which is decreasing their carrying capacity, increasing the chances of flooding along the river valleys. So that is definitely a concern.
Meenal, endurance cycling is very interesting. So let me ask you, does it take mental strength or physical strength?
Ma'am, it takes both of them. But I think mental strength definitely has to be on priority, because there are times when you physically feel exhausted, but mental strength has to be there. So I break down the journey into small parts. I set up certain landmarks for myself and then divide the journey into parts and then consolidate into a final journey.
You have all this background in physics and computer science and all. So why would you not pursue a more profitable career in those subjects and choose to sit for such difficult exams instead?
Ma'am, with respect to profitability, I'm not a money-minded person. I was always inclined towards services. The choice for civil services also comes throughout my school and college life. I've held multiple leadership positions, so I'm naturally gravitated towards holding positions where I'm coordinating teams and holding events. So that is why civil services.
What do you think your core strengths are that would help you as an administrator?
Ma'am, first of all, I'm a creative person. I have good problem solving skills. I don't know what it is called in English, but I am a jugadu person. So I am the person who goes on fixing broken things in the home. Secondly, I'm not a short-tempered person. I am very tolerant to people around me, which is the core strength of a leader. These are the few strengths I have as an administrator.
You have chosen IFS as your second, in your second this thing, you've chosen IFS. You also had some optional subjects as political science and international relations. How much do you read on international relations?
Ma'am, not much. I read newspapers daily, but not in-depth studies.
So, how would you rate India's neighborhood at this point in terms of stability, political stability, governance, and our outreach?
Ma'am, India's neighborhood is definitely politically unstable, and there are turbulent times throughout the neighborhood, be it in Myanmar, Bangladesh, or Sri Lanka. Regarding India's approach to these neighbors, I think India has upheld its moral commitments before everything. India is extending aids, be it military or humanitarian. India is responding as the first responder in Indo-Pacific. That is what scholars call it. So India's position has been that of neighborhood first. So India's position in that regard has been very welcoming.
How do you see India's Act East policy?
Ma'am, it is a keystone of Indian foreign policy, especially in the times when India is projecting itself as the voice of Global South. It also helps India to build relationships for countering China's Belt and Road Initiative, because these countries are more closer to China. So it is important for India to act in its eastern front so that it can counter the boxing up strategy of China.
But that is in an ideal situation. You mentioned Myanmar. It is in a state of conflict right now. How does India's Act East policy actually function in that condition?
Ma'am, India has been a first responder in case of disasters. India has also extended diplomatic relations in these countries. That is all I would like to say.
So, Neil, you are from physics.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you heard about a book titled Physics? And do you know the author?
Sorry, ma'am, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. So, you'll be surprised to know the author was Aristotle. And any political thinker that you know who tries to apply the concepts of physics in political philosophy, who is known as Newton of political science.
Sorry, ma'am, I'm not aware of it. Ma'am, I think Aristotle himself applies concepts of physics in political science, especially in his empirical studies. He has compared constitutions of multiple nations and given empirical data to give his final theories. I think that is what the foundation of physics is, uh, collecting data and then framing final laws.
So, have you heard about Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was his methodology?
Ma'am, I'm forgetting the name, but I know the methodology as such. The RC method, but I'm not a
Resolutive composite.
yes, resolutive composite.
And can you explain, because your physics and political philosophy, it converge a lot. So, can you explain the difference between dialectical motion and mechanical motion?
Ma'am, dialectical motion works on three principles: negation of negation and two others, which says that negativity drives out eventually. But mechanical motion, on the other hand, is translatory in nature. It is not a cyclical motion. It does not negate anything. So, as per Newton's first law of motion, unless a force is applied, the state will remain in the object will remain in its own state of motion.
But dialectical?
But in dialectical, I think I'm not able to remember the scholar Hegel. I think he says that the spirit itself emerges and the truth shows. So, but I don't think that happens in actual physical sciences.
So, have you heard this term overlapping consensus?
Yes, ma'am.
Who is the thinker? What is the concept?
Ma'am, John Rawls is the thinker who gave the concept of overlapping consensus. It was in counterposition to communitarian thinkers who gave that there have to be respect for other cultures as well, and minority rights have to be respected. Rawls, on the other hand, gave the concept of overlapping consensus that though in private spheres there can be areas where people have conflicting opinions, but there has to be a public sphere where the consensus overlaps.
Can you compare Newton's third law and the karma theory?
Yes, ma'am, they are very much in concurrence. Uh, as per Newton's third law of motion, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And the same thing is propagated by the karma theory, that whatever we do comes back eventually. So I think both are in very much concurrence.
So, there's a close relation between physics and philosophy.
Yes, ma'am, we can say so.
Now, who got the Nobel Prize for physics and for what? This year.
When three scientists have received a Nobel Prize: John Clark, John Martinez, and Michel Devereux. They received the prize for showing quantum tunneling at a macro scale, especially in electric circuits. They demonstrated manipulation of current across a Josephson junction, which is a keystone in quantum computing.
So, what will be the future, like where this theory can take us?
Ma'am, it will be a foundation of quantum computing in the future. Since it is able to manipulate electric circuits, that too on a quantum level, so there are multiple states that a particle can obtain. Unlike the bits, as it is called, bits operate on 0 and 1. Qubits, on the other hand, which are foundations of quantum computing, they can have multiple states between 0 to 1. So they will make computing faster. So they can be used in cryptography, high level sensors. These are some of the ones.
Okay. So, you are from Uttarakhand. Your state has introduced uniform civil code.
Yes, ma'am.
What are the salient things and what is the main objective behind that?
And the salient features are that there will be a uniform civil code, irrespective of the personal laws of the religion. So it seeks to have an integration among the communities. There was a a much debated about feature that was mandatory registration of live-in relationships. So these are a few, and these are the few features. Regarding objectives of the law, I think it seeks to integrate civil code. Secondly, it intends women's safety and to reduce judicial burden, women empowerment. These are some of the objectives.
How does it reduces judicial burden?
Ma'am, personal laws have been a major source of judicial burden because they are not codified as such, especially the Muslim law. So, in that sense, if a uniform civil code is applied, judicial burden will reduce because
So does it not like we are deviating from the principles of secularism? Specifically Indian secularism, because UCC has been in directive principles and not has been enforced. And up till now, we have not enforced it at the union level. So I feel that somewhere this action can be interpreted as we are compromising with our secular agenda.
ma'am, the Indian brand of secularism is of Sarva Dharma Samabhav, that is equal respect to all the religions. And UCC,
We are imposing one way of life. Equal respect for all religion doesn't mean bringing uniformity.
ma'am, it is bringing uniformity only in the legal sense while maintaining the cultural diversity among religions. So I think in that sense, it is a way towards the secularism. It is also symbolic of progress in a traditional society like India.
So how the two things are possible together means legal uniformity and cultural diversity. So family, marriage, these things are very foundations of culture. And you are trying to give a uniform character to it, uniform set of laws. You can't say, and then what else, like how it is ensuring cultural diversity? Is it assimilation or it is integration?
Ma'am, I think it is integration because I think maintaining cultural diversity cannot be antithetical to legal uniformity. Uh, Bringing all the laws into a common umbrella of uniform civil code.
Was there a demand from the Muslim women community for change?
No, ma'am, not as much as there was a demand from the government. But I think here is what the beauty of democracy lies. I think women rights are the most fundamental objectives of uniform civil code. So that is how women will be empowered.
So, what else should be done to improve the overall status of women in India? What is the gender ratio? Sex ratio?
Ma'am, 1020.
1020.
Yes, ma'am.
Means this is census or this is an FHS.
So this is NFHS 5.
So, what should be done to, and whether the situation of Hindu women have improved after government has got new laws?
Ma'am, regarding further steps that can be taken for women empowerment, I think education is the primary thing that we can target. Secondly, property rights, financial empowerment, increasing, incentivizing SHGs to increase the bargaining power of women as a whole. Then there has to be political representation, which has already been done at the grassroots level and also at the central level by 106th Amendment. Regarding the condition of Hindu women in India, I think it has significantly improved after the Hindu Succession Act, especially after equal co-parcenary rights were given. So I think in financial sense, the status of women has improved.
Okay, so you endorse introducing uniform civil code at the central level also?
Ma'am, I'm in the favor of introducing uniform civil code at the center. But in my opinion, it should not be an umbrella code that should be brought in a single scheme as has been done in Uttarakhand. I think there has to be a gradual process instead of wholesale engineering. So, firstly, personal laws can be codified and brought in concurrence of the constitutional mandate. Then, as the community is accepted, then there can be a uniform consensus, because religion itself is very deeply ingrained in the minds of Indian society as well as the politics. So, bringing an umbrella law will not be a good idea.
What do you know about Kala Pani dispute and what is its current status?
Ma'am, Kalapani dispute arises from Treaty of Sugauli in 1815. It arises from different interpretations of the treaty. According to the treaty, the river Kali forms the boundary between India and Nepal. But according to Nepalese position, the river starts from Kalapani, putting the Limpiadhura region in Nepal. On the other hand, India interprets the treaty differently. According to the Indian position, the river starts from Lipu Lake, putting the region in Indian possession. As far as ground reality is concerned, there is no military confrontation, though there has been a diplomatic confrontation. Nepalese government has also published maps which shows the region in their political map. But I think unilateral diktats do not define the ground realities.
So, what is your view? Is Kala Pani legally India's territory or there is some validity in Nepal's claims?
Ma'am, in my limited knowledge, the Kalapani is definitely an integral part of India. But there is an ambiguity in the Treaty of Sugauli itself. So the
What is Government of India's stand on that?
Ma'am, Government of India's stand is that Kalapani is an integral territory of India and cartographic aggression of Nepal cannot be tolerated. So there has not to be any military confrontation, but the diplomatic channels are open and there have been talks on this.
Suggest a way forward on Kala Pani issue.
Ma'am, I think the way in which Berubari dispute was settled, in the similar ways, Kalapani dispute can also be settled. But at this moment, I think it is very soon to draw any conclusions or any solutions. Yeah.
So, tell us something about the Gen Z protests in Nepal and what lessons India should draw out of it.
Ma'am, the Gen Z protests were mainly in response to the corruption scandals in Nepal. The assets that which the political figures were holding. The precipitating point was that the digital freedom was taken away. The lessons that India can draw from the protests is that the freedom of speech has to be maintained, artistic freedom has to be upheld, and there is no way that India can anyway, I mean, can snatch away the fundamental rights of the Gen Z, of the youngsters.
So, are we doing anything like that in India?
Ma'am, I think the UCC in Uttarakhand in itself is an example where right to privacy has been violated by mandatory registration of a live-in relationship, the failure of which attracts a penalty of rupees 25,000. So I think these fundamental rights cannot be violated because the Gen Z generation has a tool of social media.
I think it's a good thing because women are vulnerable in living in relationships. And if it is registered, I think it strengthens their position. That is not that should not be seen as something very wrong step.
Ma'am, though the intent is women's safety, but the mandatory position, I think, it contradicts the proportionality test that was laid in the Puttaswamy judgment. So, women, if voluntarily want to register the live-in relationship, it should be welcomed, but it should not be mandatory, in my opinion.
Then I think you must be disagreeing with SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act because in that case also, even if there is no registration, etc., government has to take proactive steps in favor of the vulnerable sections.
Ma'am, Prevention of Atrocities Act does not violate any fundamental rights as such. Instead of,
But rules, etc., norms are very strong and it acts as a strong deterrence against those who will be thinking about violation. So these type of laws, like for vulnerable sections, the law should have strong deterrence, I believe. Anyway, so
I have a couple of follow-up questions.
yes.
You mentioned Birubari. How was that settled?
Sir, some enclaves were exchanged between the two countries.
So it was not specific to Berubari,
Yes.
It was land boundary agreement of 2015.
No, Berubari happened.
Berubari happened in 1999.
Yes, sir.
So that is okay. That is one. NFHS data. How reliable is that? When we compare it with census data, it was 10-20 gender ratio starting from I think 972 in 2011 census. I think 972 was or 928 overall. So 10-20 within 14-15 years, so much of gender has, ratio improved. How reliable is NFHS data? That is my question. And shouldn't we therefore go in for census at the earliest?
Sir, I think the
Problem with NFHS data is that sample size.
yes, sir, correct. Sir, that definitely remains a problem. But since last census was done in 2011, that is the only data that we can rely on for now. Regarding the sex ratio, I think PCPNDT test act is one of the main reasons why the sex ratio has improved. Women is one.
Which act?
So prenatal pre-concept diagnostics text, which
But then the figures are still, not reliable because of the small sample size. Prenatal test तो पहले से होने लग गया था. I think the 7 weeks, even prior to when our children were getting born, उस समय से शुरू हो गया था. So anyway, that is one. UCC by its very name is supposed to be uniform. So giving exceptions in the UCC of Goa to people who don't have male child after say age of 35 or something to get married again, or to people in the northeast, tribals of northeast. Is that right? Uniform should be uniform.
sir, I'm not aware of the Goa Uniform Civil Code, but I think uniformity has to happen eventually.
Eventually,
Yes.
but then it has to be progressive as you had already said.
Yes.
All right, done.
I'll just wrap up follow-up question. You mentioned about freedom of speech and that being a major reason for the kind of dissent that we saw in Nepal. But if you look at Bhutan, Bhutan has serious curbs on social media as well as speech. You look at Myanmar, Myanmar doesn't have democracy and has a complete ban on social media and freedom of speech. How do you explain the absence of real dissent in the same way that we saw in Nepal?
And social media is the main tool which the Nepal Gen Z used. So human resource mobilization was quite easier in Nepal as compared to Myanmar, where social media is completely banned. So I think that is the reason why we did see similar kind of dissent in Bhutan and Myanmar.
एक और चीज आपने बोली थी 106th amendment.
Yes, sir.
So why postpone its implementation for say till next what is that called?
Delimitation.
Delimitation and thereafter census.
So the last census was done in 2000.
11.
Yes, sir. So I think the
Delimitation is due in 25. It is due now.
yes. Sir, I think the electoral rules and the constituency boundaries have to be updated before the 104.
How? The gender ratio, whether you have this area or have this area, would probably remain the same. How does the reservation get impacted? Reservation for women get impacted.
Sir, I think it is more with respect to the time buffer that Government of India is taking before implementing such a decision. Regarding
I propose that it's a populist measure just to show off कि हम women का वो कर रहे हैं. What is your view on this?
Sir, I would respectfully disagree. I don't think it is a populist measure. It is a very progressive step, which was long due and is finally welcomed. But regarding its delay, I think there have been allegations of bias per se. But I think Government of India also needs time because the bill itself was passed in 2023. The general elections were held in 2024. So there was not much time that Government of India had to implement the act. So I think in that sense, it was a progressive step.
So, do you believe that government can do no wrong?
Sorry, ma'am.
Do you subscribe to the idea that government can do no wrong?
No, ma'am, I don't agree that the government can do no wrong. There have been instances where government has rebutted its own position, but it is a trial and error democracy that we have. It is a relative
Trial and error.
I mean, we learn from our mistakes. It is a relatively new democracy in the political history. So, 75 years since our independence, I think we are open for mistakes.
Example is 100 and more than 100 changes in constitution.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay, please carry.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.